Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7:15, so welcome to this meeting of Braintree District Council Cabinet. There are no fire alarms expected tonight. In the event of an alarm going off, we will exit by the appropriate fire doors either at the back or at the side and assemble in the car park, which I hope we won't have to do in view of the rather unpleasant weather outside. But okay, we'll start with apologies for absence. I have no apologies for absence, but Councillor Cunningham is not that well and is joining us on screen. To comply with the appropriate regulations, he will be able to participate in debate, but will not be able to formally move any recommendations or vote on any aspect of our business tonight. But he was keen to be able to deal with the Rural Prosperity Fund, so he will come in at that stage. Okay, moving on the agenda. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest that any member wishes to declare? I will declare one an MPI as a member of Essex County Council, which is referred to in the medium-term financial strategy, item 6A. Are there any other? Tom Cunningham on. Sorry, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. I'd like to declare the same non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council who are mentioned in various reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Any other declarations? No? Okay, thank you. Move on to minutes of the previous meeting. In fact, two previous meetings. That's the meeting held on the 5th of October and also the one held on the 10th of October. The minutes of both meetings have been circulated. Are members of Cabinet happy that I sign them as a correct record? Agreed. Thank you. Right, that takes us on to item 4, public question time. There are no speakers registered for tonight's meeting, so we move swiftly on to item 5 under the health and wellbeing agenda, and we welcome guests from Fusion Lifestyle who are going to make a presentation to Cabinet, but I'll ask Councillor Tattersley to introduce our colleagues.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to welcome to the meeting Anthony Crawley, who's the Chief Executive of Fusion, and John Richardson, who's the Fusion Divisional Business Manager. If you can't tell them apart, John is the one with the hair on his face. We normally invite Fusion to Cabinet meetings on an annual basis, but, you know, due to Fusion and other factors, this has not happened now for a couple of years. And I have to say it's been a really difficult few years for all leisure providers. And I hope that this presentation will highlight the developments and challenges that have faced Fusion over the past years and what they've done to try and overcome a lot of these. But before the presentation by Anthony, I'd just like to look broadly at some of the more corporate issues and the way that Fusion has supported and continues to support the Council in achieving our corporate objectives. There are a number of examples, and I've only picked a few, but they've provided staff and facilities to help the communities in bouncing back from the COVID pandemic by addressing both physical and emotional health and well-being through opening their leisure centres and providing staff and facilities in there. And we're starting to recognise that there is still a hangover a little bit from the lockdown, because we've still got a number of people that are reluctant to leave the homes, you know, and it's a bigger problem than I ever thought it were. And Fusion is certainly making a lot of activities that's attracting people that wouldn't normally come out of the house because they know they're going to be with like-minded people. At the last council meeting, Councillor Dervish raised interest in women's football. Our contract with Fusion requires them to engage with some of our harder-to-reach groups, such as women's and girls' activities, older people, and groups involved in individuals living with disability, dementia, and their carers. They've helped enhance our partnerships with education providers, Essex County Council, Public Health, the integrated care, the development of the integrated care systems, Community 360 and Active Essex. They are strong supporters of the Live Well agenda, and they continue to provide valuable facilities to our sports clubs and help with training and fixtures planning. We'll now hear the things that they've not done so well from Mr. Crawley. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Chairman, and everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. John and I will go through the slides and then answer questions at the end. So this is it going to go full slide? There we go. Thank you. This is an annual review, September 21 to August 22. What we've just set out as an agenda. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just sort of to recap on the context of the contract extension that has been in place, some progress to date, and then looking ahead to the future. Next slide. So you will recall that there was a 5-year extension in September 22. Thought it was good to recap on the key objectives. Secure investment into the facilities. I'm sure, hopefully, you've seen around that a significant investment has just gone into the facilities at Sport and Health, Whittam and Halstead. We're going to introduce a new local sport and community development officer, new local marketing, and deliver on the council's Live Well strategy outcomes, as just mentioned by the councillor. So our tender proposed circa 1.2 million of capital development proposals. It's probably quite unusual for that to be going in leisure centres at the moment if it's not energy efficient investment. It's great to have customer facing investment going in. We've agreed and committed to ongoing maintenance and life cycle investment throughout the contract. We take income and expenditure risk for the contract. As the council rightly said, it's been a very tough couple of years, not just for Fusion, for everyone, but the industry's been hit, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The idea is we increase participation in both membership and key focus on non-membership income. Again, a challenging environment with the cost of living crisis. And then we'll continue to invest in a sports and community development service to drive community engagement in the district and afar, because likewise with your officers the other day we met people from Essex, and we're trying to work with the NHS and stuff like that to try and get more people into the centres via different routes. Progress to date. Next slide, please. So the 1.2 million development schemes, Braintree Sport and Health, new gym kit, new spin studio and refurbishment studios, were just there earlier. Looked great. Very, very busy this evening. It's great to see. Whittam Leisure Centre was due to be finished today. He's nodding, so it did. So replacement gym kit, again, new studios and refurbishment of other areas. And the last one to be finished this coming month, just before Christmas, will be the Halstead Leisure Centre and Braintree Swim and Fitness, and similar works will be done at both of them. Next slide. Just a couple of images of the finished works there. You get time to, for those who haven't been in it, it's worth going in. The top left there is the Braintree Sport Centre, which looks fantastic. There's a transformation, and we've had great feedback to date so far. Next slide. Okay, so progress to date, participation. It's nice to see a graph going in the right direction for once. Albeit, shall I say, probably not fast enough, and we'll come on to that in a moment, but it is a positive, and obviously the tip there on the right-hand side, that is pre-investment, so you can imagine what we would like to see now is a much more steeper graph. Next slide, please. So, in the last year, we've seen a 27.5% increase in membership. Sounds great. About 29% in swim school. However, in memberships, we are still circa 26% down against pre-COVID. And that just shows you the journey we're coming back from and need to get to set expectations. Swim school's done really well. Parents have really, come back in droves. That's not just here. We've got sites all around the country, and that is a theme everywhere. So that's good news. And again, for us, it's about creating more space, getting more children in, swim teachers. It's very difficult to recruit, but we're training more people. We're giving free courses and stuff like that to get more people in, because it's, you know, it's one that's bucked the trend of the return. But overall participation, going back to what the councillor said earlier, circa 38% down against pre-COVID. So we're looking at programming, stuff outside, getting people in that are nervous about returning. So there's a lot of messaging and a lot of support for people, but it's a big, big gap from where we were. Next slide. Further progress state, as I mentioned there, we have got a new community engagement officer. We're doing work at Whitton with wellness cafes. We've funded, funding has been secured for the Safer Streets project. We've also secured £5,000 for active rewards in Braintree. We're now introducing Warm Wednesdays to support the cost of living, to get residents in. We're working again with your officers on that, and you know, some great work going on. And then we are looking, well, the guys have secured, and I see it tonight actually, the resurfacing of the sport pitch at the health club, and also at Halstead Leisure Centre, the new 3G pitch. And also a big project that's done well and made the press quite recently here, is the Man v Fat project launch, which is a football project which I think is on the next slide. Gives you a bit more, so it sort of shows you how they're getting on, how many people have participated, what weight they've lost. It's sort of walking football, but it's gone really, really well. And again, working with Active Essex and the council.
Yeah, just quickly on that, 61 players have lost weight over the season, and it's been 2 seasons, and that totals 324 kilograms. These are men that are large, and you can see from the pictures where they start off, and it's just some of the social benefits that they've got from that, and we've managed to support that over at Halstead, and that's a clear indication of some of the success we've had with certain projects.
Next slide, please. And mentioned earlier, the Whitton Wellness Cafe, launched on the 9th of November, is the first of the new monthly community events that we're putting in to try and get, which was mentioned earlier, we've got to try and now really reach out to the whole community and also bring the leisure centre out to the community. So do events outside in local community centres and things like that to try and get people back into the leisure centres.
It's also important to add on that Wednesdays is there's a lot of local partner agencies there. So there's the Adult Mental Health and Wellbeing Community 360, the Whitton Community Hub, Rural Research Project, YMCA. So there's a lot of other agencies there in order to bring different people within the community into our leisure centres, which we wouldn't normally be able to tap into. But this is something which Richard, from the community, who's the new community engagement officer, is trying to break those barriers down by bringing those people in differently and not using the word sport anymore, using wellness, health and well-being rather than the word sport all the time or leisure centre.
Next slide, please. So then looking ahead to this year coming, financial challenges. I know everyone will be facing this stuff, but utilities, I'm sure you've seen it in the press, a lot of operators now are reducing hours, shutting, centres down, pools are closing everywhere. So that's a big challenge we got in terms of utility and resources with the cost of living. To overcome that, further opportunities, investment in centres in terms of sustainability. So I know we've got solar panels at some sites, but we're working with the officers to see what we can come up with to reduce the utility impact onto the centres, because no other industry is facing, the rise that we are in our utilities. We're looking at getting a new annual service plan for this year, again, working with the officers on your objectives, BWell strategy, active Braintree network, etc., to really come up with a plan to tackle inactivity, and for us to get the 40% and more back into the centres. It is vital that we do that for the community. Again, extending the sports community development programmes, such as on what I just there, and then some other bits like refurbishment of the dry side at Halstead Leisure Centre. And again, I touched on sustainability a minute ago, but working in partnership with the team here with their climate change strategy, because I know every table, we're at the top of the table in terms of usage and stuff like that. So, if it's okay, Chair, I will take any questions accordingly.
Thank you very much, Anthony and John. Are there any comments or questions to our guests? Sorry, Jackie?
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to ask the gentleman what they're doing about retaining the existing clubs and that they have to make sure that they continue there because they're providing a service. For example, Halstead Swimming Club. Councillor Tashley know that in the past we've had to contact him because they've had problems, and I know that they had a problem again a month ago. I'd just like to make sure that they are not being pushed out when they are getting people to go there, keeping them off the streets, the young people. It's what we want for them. And I would hope that you could come to a conclusion with them that is satisfactory to everybody.
Yeah, sorry. I have responded to the club literally 10 days ago, and I'm awaiting their response. But we're not looking to push anybody out. We want as many people using the facility as possible. We would actively engage with them in terms of trying to come to any agreements that they might feel aggrieved with. But I'll take that one away and wait for their response.
If I may, just on that, it is vital that we have clubs in the centres. We're there for the community, and they have suffered, like everyone, really bad over the pandemic. And we've worked with numerous clubs about helping them out with, for example, payment plans and support them so they can build up their membership again and stuff like that. However, they are suffering, like us, the drop off in members and users. But that is vital for our centres.
Mr. Chairman, I do sympathise with them. They contact me because Halstead is my patch, and I have to support them because it's the young people of our town, and there isn't a lot for them to do in our town. And by bringing the young people in, it tends to bring the parents in and other people. So it's a knock-on effect that you get. And I wasn't very happy with the response that I had seen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abbott and then Councillor McKee.
Thank you. It's very good to see the health and cost of living support measures. Really good, particularly in Witham, being my sort of hometown. On the energy and climate change front, when the Witham Leisure Centre opened, I was lucky enough to go up on the roof and see the solar panels. So on that, I know it's an equation. Obviously, you've got to try and save energy because of the cost, but also generating energy. So as well as energy saving measures, have you thought about whether, or is there any opportunity for expanding maybe the solar panels on the roof?
So we've done a lot of surveys. There is a government scheme out, the public decarbonisation scheme. Phase 4 is due out early next year, we believe. We've worked with other partners over the last 3 phases, and we're working with your officers at the moment to come up with a plan, albeit whether it's ground source heat pump, whether it's extra solar panels, whatever the buildings can accommodate, and will give us the best, savings for that investment.
Councillor McKee.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just commend John Richardson, because I know him as John the coach of a football team a girls' football team, a 10-year-olds that he is coaching and showing, not just is he managing stuff, he's taking 10 or 11 young girls, one of which is my granddaughter, that's why I know all about it, and I stand at a field in Braintree and watch them play, and they're doing extremely well, and I think he's living the talk as well as walking it as well by taking these young girls out, and they're now passionate about football and passionate about winning actually against boys' teams. So I think it just recognising that he's just more than just a business manager, he's actually a coach of an outstanding football team.
Other football teams are available, I suppose we should say. Councillor Van Dolcombe.
Thank you, Chairman. Purely by chance today, or not by chance, a leaflet came through my door from Fusion with an offer. Was it 3 for 1 or 3 free?
A 3-day free pass for all residents.
Yes. So it was quite a coincidence, but good to see that you are promoting it. and trying to, sorry, it's gone now, the 36% down, trying to reverse that. Congratulations.
Thank you. So just to confirm for everyone, that's a Royal Mail door drop that we did to various postcodes around the centres that had the investment with every resident that gets the free day pass.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chairman. 26% drop in membership pre-COVID, 38% decline in participation. What savings have you been forced to make as a consequence of those figures?
Well, first thing any business should do, we looked at overheads. So we reduced head office costs, we reduced costs. We have looked at our spending, shall we say, across the whole business in terms of investment has been put on hold. Because we're a charity, we reinvest all our profits, so that has somewhat slowed up as we would have done before. And we're trying to protect reserves because as a charity, we've got to protect our reserves for what we're worried about, unless something happens, is this utility squeeze that's going to happen, in the new year.
Can I just ask, I mean, the figures are quite stark, but of course we're looking at them in isolation. I just wonder whether you could share your expertise across the business, not necessarily just your business, but the leisure business as a whole, to give us some feel of where we as a district sit. Are we, well, you've lost 28%, but everybody else has only lost 1%, or, is it just a fairly consistent pattern across the country?
For us, it's a fairly consistent pattern across the country. And UK Active, our governing body, when they release their statistics, it's quite similar across other providers as well. There's a lot of support going on with government or to government to get support for us as a protected service for utility support, a bit like the COVID support packages we got from the government, the DCMS.
Thank you. Councillor Tattersall, I think you wanted to come back.
I just want a couple of things that I would have mentioned had I been making a presentation. Is the emphasis not just on talking about leisure facilities per se, but there are little things that go off that we wouldn't normally get to hear about, like the equipment in the gyms is suitable for people with disabilities. There's an awful lot of equipment in the gym that people can use without feeling embarrassed, but can exercise in a way that they wouldn't normally in, dare I say, privately owned gyms. And of course, there's the support in the council's strategic objectives. I think we've actually covered all that one. Councillor Mrs. Pell, the most complaints that I get about the leisure facilities is that the casual swimmers can't get to swim because of the number of clubs that are in there taking up the lanes. So it is a balancing act between the two, and I think we're making a reasonable bash about it, trying to be clearer about when the casual swimming is available, but also recognising that the lifeblood really for leisure centres, I think, is the organised clubs. So it's not just a matter of disadvantaging them; it's trying to balance the two different parties.
Okay. Any other comments or questions at all? Anthony, John, anything else you wish to add?
No, just thank you for the opportunity, and hopefully see you again.
Well, can I thank you for coming along? We've had a very good relationship, difficult at times, and it hasn't been the easiest last few years, and from both your side and our side as well. But I think what has appealed to us as a council has been the way in which you have very much tried to run a business which actually helps to achieve some of the aims we're getting. We seem to have a common cause on what we're trying to achieve. So I'm very grateful for you giving up the time this evening to come along, and I think we haven't been able to do it the last year or so, but I think it's very useful for an opportunity for you to speak direct to us about what's going on, and also an opportunity for you to be in the more public way of all the services that are on offer. And thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. you're more than welcome to stay, but if you do want to go home, we will fully understand what the situation. Or again, you may wish to go for a swim in one of your leisure centres. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to item 6 on the agenda under the Finance and Corporate Transformation heading. Item 6A, the Medium-Term Financial Strategy 23-24 to 26-27, which you'll find on pages 6 to 39 of your agenda. And I'll ask Councillor McKee to introduce it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report provides a detail of the progress of updating the financial profile and the Medium-Term Financial Strategy 2023-24 to 26-27. The report sets out the basis on which assumptions have been updated since the MTFS was last approved in February 2022 and what options have been identified to address the forecast budget gap. The report also provides an update on the capital programme, including details of the proposed additions arising from the capital bids received. The report was drafted prior to the autumn statement, which was published on 17th of November 2022, but of course it wasn't. The report and a supporting presentation were provided to the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee held on the 23rd of November, at which all members were invited to attend. The context of this year's budget planning is one of high uncertainty with significant increase in volatility and risk. Inflation and other cost pressures bear heavily on the Council's finances, and the cost of living crisis impacts our residents and businesses. The Cabinet has therefore had to carefully weigh up the impact of next year's budget on households, service users and partners, whilst remaining confident that the Council can meet its legal obligation of setting a balanced budget. From prudent fiscal management, we are fortunate that we have a reasonable level of balances and reserves that we can draw upon. However, this is not a sustainable long-term solution. The report therefore sets out some of the programmes and activities that are being introduced and developed, which will contribute towards addressing the financial challenges that lay ahead. Recognising the uncertain environment in which we now operate and the changes in the Council's activities over several years, as we have sought to become more self-financing, it is being recommended that the minimum level of balances considered prudent to retain is increased from £1.5 million to £3 million. Assumptions and estimates continue to be reviewed, and further updates to the budget will be tabled as we progress nearer to the February meeting of full Council, where the final budget and Council tax for 23-24 will need to be agreed. The recent autumn statement has provided high-level clarification on local government finances. However, we still await the final detail which will be provided in the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement. We are currently advised this statement is not expected to be published until week commencing 19th of December. Recognising this is late for local authorities, DLHUC have indicated they will provide early indications ahead of the formal announcement so that authorities can continue to plan. Excuse me. In the Cabinet report, Section 11 lays out the timetable for the budget process for the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement. It is expected now, we think, on the 21st of December, and to allow officers to consider the impact on the MTFS, the strategy workshop in that timetable is now planned for the 22nd of December. The report includes difficult choices and options that have been considered for reducing the budget gap, both in the next year and in future years. Final decisions have yet to be taken, and these will be carefully considered in light of feedback received at last week's Performance Management Scrutiny. Highlighted in the report are those activities that will help households during the cost of living crisis. This includes continuation of the local tax support scheme in its current form, which provides over £7 million of relief to means-tested council taxpayers. The continuation of an exceptional hardship fund, coupled with the support and advice that we provide in collaboration with the Citizen Advice and by the Council's own welfare officers. It is also proposed to support the recommendation of the recent Combined Cost of Living Scrutiny Committee to provide additional resources towards the Discretionary Housing Payment Fund, which provides extra financial support related to housing and which will restore the level of financial aid available in the current year to that which was provided in 21-22. The recommendations set out in the report, and they are: Cabinet to agree that no discretionary changes are proposed to the local tax support scheme for 23-24, and consequently there is no requirement for the consultation to be undertaken. 2.2. The revenue and capital programme position as presented in this report constitute the initial proposals and options for determining the 23-24 budget, and that views are sought as appropriate. Funding available for discretionary housing payment in 22-23 is increased by £77,000, although the allocation from the COVID-19 reserve to increase the minimum level of the general fund allocated to balance for the budget strategy from 1.5 million to 3 million. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Open for comments and questions. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got 4 comments and related questions. And I ought to declare also I'm a member of a parish council, just for clarity, because one of the questions relates to that. In the proposed reduction of 33% parish councils for their street cleaning grant, how is that figure derived? And is it? I know that this administration cannot bind any future administrations, but was that a precursor to a potential further 33% cut? And
could I just interrupt you? Not on your point, but you just remind me. I'm also a member of a parish council which is subject to that, so I should declare that interest. Particularly, I think, as my parish council is the one that loses most from that proposal.
And you asked for suggestions and consultation. Could a suggested reinstatement of that money be achieved by not increasing the communications and marketing budget by 25,000? Second question, could the recycling calendars be maintained by printing them in the Contact magazine? Third question, it is true, absolutely, and I accept that not all properties have gardens, but maybe not tonight, but could we, as we go through the budget process, please have a figure for the percentage of any type of property in the district that does use green bins? And fourthly, is a 2-part question. Did a Cabinet member, and if so, which Cabinet member, suggest that my capital bid for Silver End Bowls Club be changed fundamentally to a public car park without any reference to myself or the Bowls Club? Thank you.
Okay, let's just take some of those. I'll take the last question first, and then I'll leave you to deal with the things. All the cabinet bids, let's just so you know, all the bids, capital bids, sorry, were discussed at a cabinet session, a non-public session, at which that particular one relating to the Bowls Club, a suggestion was made, why could we not? And we've asked officers to go away and look at that, and they will come back with whether there is a reason why we can't, or whether there is a reason how we could, and what the impact would be. As and when we get to that stage, we would then be consulting. Okay?
Well, with respect, that's not the question I asked. Did a Cabinet member make that suggestion, and if so, who?
Well, it wasn't God that made that thing. So, yes, there was a Cabinet member who made it, and I asked for that to be looked into. Okay? Right. If we can now go on to the other questions that were asked. Councillor McKee.
Right. Let's take number 3, the use of green bins. The actual business case, as you probably realise, have not yet been worked out. There is work going on to identify a number of issues around charging for green waste. That is, how many green bins are there? 50,000 is the number that I've been quoted approximately. Where those green bins are is known, but I don't have the number of the percentage of households that have green bins. I'm sure that operations do have that number, and I will provide it to you. Okay? Recycling calendars, it can't go in the contact magazine because you'd have to put every recycling calendar into the contact magazine and hope that the person reading the contact magazine gets the right recycling calendar for their home. Because currently they are they're route specific, and therefore it would be very difficult to then have the contact magazine also route specific, would add to cost. We have looked quite carefully at this. This is a contentious issue amongst the cabinet, frankly, about whether we do or do not provide these calendars. But on balance, it is considered to be better value for money for the taxpayer, because those people, and I remind you, Councillor Abbott, if you want a calendar in a physical format, you can request one and it will be delivered to your home and you get one. So nobody will be without a recycling calendar if they really want it. It'd be interesting to see how many people apply. Now, on the first question, can you remind me again the reduction of 33%? I just lost, after the 33%, you then asked for another reduction, or?
Yeah, well, so it's a two-part question. Is that a potential precursor for a future 33% reduction? And where did the figure come from? And could that money be reimbursed by not increasing the marketing budget, which is proposed to be increased by 25,000?
The 33% was decided to be a reasonable reduction in that grant, effectively, to each parish council. And I'm sure that people who proposed it considered higher numbers and lower numbers. The answer is no, we would not fund that from other sources. It's been a recommendation that's been made in order to rebalance the budget effectively, and actually not doing something else to fund something that we decided or recommending is a way to actually get better balance of the budget is not appropriate, not being considered appropriate, is the answer to your question. Now, by the way, no, we're not tying anyone's future to a 33% next year or the year after. This is a one-off decision. I'm not suggesting that somebody else won't make a similar decision later on. That's in the hands of the next cabinet.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? I think Councillor Cunningham, did you wish to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and apologies. It was just a belated declaration of non-pecuniary interest in line with yours as a member of Great Norley Parish Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mann.
A comment, Chair, if I may. You'll be aware of the popularity of the green waste collection. It could be that we're in danger of being punished by our own success, because we've pushed up expectations a great deal. People are very satisfied with the service, and would, I think, very much wish it to continue pretty much in the form that it is. I know these are very, very difficult times for the council, and you will have factored in the possible sort of backlash from residents if they see what they would think as a diminution of the service and a reduction of what the council is providing for them, if there is a charge to be introduced.
Thank you. I would actually say I think it's the complete opposite. We would be looking to expand the service. One of the criticisms that there is of the service is that we stop it at the end of November, and experience of the last couple of years, and I've still got leaves falling in my garden, which I'll now won't have the convenience of the green bin to put in. I'll have to collect and take up myself. Would run alongside a 12-month service. So that I think is an extension of the service. Experience has shown with those authorities that have moved that by and large the take-up rate has stayed pretty good, that people have liked the service, and I think I agree with you. I think it's a service which is very well received, and that clearly there will be some drop-off. I think the price that we're using at the moment in these discussions is one about the middle. There are other places that are double what we are suggesting, yet still seem to be able to attract. At the end of the day, of course, what people do, we won't know until they actually do it. But I think it will address one of the issues which has caused concern, and that is not collecting. At the moment, we say, well, the end of November, if we get a very mild period or the leaves are late in falling and they come in December, there is no way in which we can do that. That would no longer be an issue. So I think it is about getting the balance between what people are being offered, and I accept that there will need to be some work with the customers, and after all, that's what we are. We're attempting to sell a service to customers with the customers that makes it an attractive service, and I think particularly being able to offer it all year round is certainly a strong selling point, I think.
Yeah. Subsequent to the scrutiny committee, there's a piece of work that I have asked operations to do in readiness for the next scrutiny committee, and in that discussion, clearly the concern of operations to do with how many bins get returned and what do we do with them, and all that sort of, which is a piece of work going on to find out what would happen, what would we do with them, and so on. And there's already some experience from other councils of what happens. Interesting, the experience of other councils is that when charging is introduced, in the first year, there is a bit of knee-jerk reaction. But in the second year, when the people realise just how painful it is not to have a green bin when you've got a garden, they return, and sometimes it's a growth in the service, because you then realise, after not paying, let's say it's £50 a year, and you do a bit of maths, you work out that actually to get that rubbish taken away and taken to the what do they call it, the communal tip, I'll call it, in your car, thank you, recycling centre, in your car, and having to have it cleaned out by with a hoover because you've spilt garden rubbish in the back of your pristine motor car, people go, wait a minute, that was a pretty good service, actually, because I was only spending £50 a year, not £200 a year having my car cleaned. So the experience from other authorities is once people knee-jerk, they go straight back to the service and it grows.
Councillor Tattersley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. When we discussed the capital programme at scrutiny last week, I want to clear up some confusion, not least my own, about the answer that I gave to Councillors Everard and Hensman about the running track. The replacement of the running track was actually deferred for a year. We've had an inspection last week, and the people that gave us the authorisation of the permission to use it as an official track think that with a little bit of ongoing maintenance it'll last until next year, so we can build that into the budgets for next year to consider. And I do think I was talking about a hockey pitch, which of course is the one at Whittam. So if you pass me comments on to certainly to Councillor Everard, who I know is a keen runner on that track, we are aware that there is some ongoing maintenance. They're not that bad that we're going to lose the accreditation for it, but we will be building it in for consideration by the next council in the next budget round.
Through you, Chair, we talked about on the way how many he did work out that you'd missaid Whittam.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mrs. Pell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under 7.2.2, the community facilities, where you're talking about the toilets and what have you in Whittam and also Houstons Public Gardens, when are you anticipating this starting? In the new financial year or the following? That would exactly work, because if you're expecting someone else to take it on, they're doing their budgets now.
think that will be a matter for discussion. Ideally, we would like to bring it in at the earliest opportunity. That's why we've given early notice, at least, so that, as indeed we did to all parish councils about this, a letter went out to all clerks stroke chairman of parish councils, so that when they're making their budget, they will need to have something in mind. Better to over budget and have something less than the other way. But clearly, we have to produce a budget. We will be working up until, I suspect, almost the last knockings, because we're not going to know until at least just before Christmas what our allocation is going to be, etc. So we're having to make certain assumptions.
Mr. Chairman, I did check with our clerk at Huston Town Council after our scrutiny meeting the other day, and she tells me that nobody has been in touch with her whatsoever yet.
I think I did say at the meeting that we had spoken to Braintree in Bloom, but that is not the Town Council, and we would need to do that, and that will be done. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments or questions at all? If not, there are 4 recommendations before Cabinet this evening in paragraph 2, 2.1 to 2.4. Are you happy to accept those recommendations? Agreed. Thank you very much. Right, that then takes us on, let's get back, to item 7, under climate change and the environment, the review of the Council's enforcement policy. Can I remind colleagues this was a paper that was circulated after the original pact was done. And I ask Councillor Mrs Schmidt to introduce the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. All councils have an enforcement policy, and this is reviewed fairly regularly every 4 or 5 years due to obviously changes in policy and anything else that may have cropped up in between time. This time there was indeed quite a bit of change, because previously nearly all of the enforcement activities came under the Environmental Health Department. But since we have reorganised things, and certain of the enforcement activities for the last couple of years have been under operations, and so again that had to be changed. You will see in item 3.6 the breakdown of which department covers which things. I mean, there's nothing new there. As I said, it's as it's been going. It's just that we haven't had time up until now to update the policy. You'll notice also under item 3.7 that planning enforcement is subject to its own enforcement policy, and the 2 policies coexist but do not overlap due to the totally different nature of the enforcement actions. The revised policy will, as before, serve as a consistent framework to guide officers in decision making, and it will also help those who we have to take action again, why we are doing it, and the fact that it is always done in the same manner. As ever with something like this, we then have to go out to consultation, and that will be a 12-week consultation, which will be able to be accessed via the Council's website, social media and relevant digital newsletters. And then we will see what comes up from it. Key partners, of course, will be contacted for their views in person. I would refer you to the appendices where some, but not all, of the enforcement activities are taken. On item 1, for example. And then on the other items, such as item 7, you'll find the activities, the way they are listed, the way they are worked, the process. So absolutely everything is set down there in the way that it's done, in consistency, for fairness to the officers and, of course, to the members of public who may have broken some of our policies. It's a long thing. It's, as I said, very little change compared to our present one. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Any comments or questions from anyone? Councillor Tattersley.
Chairman, I think we should be proud of our enforcement policy. We could possibly do more, but without the power of arrest and the sort of sanctions and having a big bobby behind you, there's a limit to what you can do. And I think the champion that we've got with Councillor Schmidt stands absolutely no nonsense at all. And I know that the measure that's given by government on the effectiveness of any policy is down to the number of prosecutions that we take. And I think we can hold our head high with the numbers that we're taking and the improvements that we've achieved. This is a cracking strategy.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mann.
I agree. Very, very strong policy, very comprehensive, and I think, as you say, very similar to the one that we've got in place. Are there any significant differences that have been introduced? I mean, I couldn't spot any.
No, it's just the fact that environmental services now don't cover all enforcement, that part of it, littering and that, has gone over to operations, which of course has happened in the last few years anyway, but it was just after we'd updated the last one, and so there was no point in going through the whole exercise with the 12 weeks, etc. So it's just finalising what has been going on for some time.
Thank you, Chair.
If there are no other questions or comments, there are two recommendations in paragraph 2. Are you happy to accept those recommendations? Agreed. Thank you very much. Takes us on to the next item, item 8A, which is the Rural Prosperity Fund Implementation Plan. Councillor Cunningham will speak to this, but I will formally introduce the paper and formally move the recommendations in paras 2.1 and 2.2 so that we comply with it. And I'll hand over now to Councillor Cunningham to speak to the paper.
Thank you, Chairman, and once again my apologies for not being able to be with you at Causeway House this evening. I'm very pleased that this implementation plan is coming to Cabinet this evening, and extremely grateful for the work officers have done and for the responses of our consultees, centred around an excellent session at the Council on the 31st of October, led by the Chief Executive, where the feedback was extremely helpful in shaping schemes relevant to local need. This is to consider an addendum to the Shared Prosperity Funding Investment to allow Braintree District Council to access a total of £589,191 of Rural England Prosperity Funding for 2023-24 and 2024-25, all with the aims of supporting the Government's Levelling Up White Paper and the Future Farming Programme, and this is compatible with other partnership initiatives that are supporting rural communities. It's centred around two schemes. The first one, available to small and medium-sized businesses to help them grow and develop and undertake innovation. Capital grants of between £20,000 and £50,000 will be available, although match funding from businesses of at least 20% will be required. The second is available to parish councils, charities, community groups that are properly constituted, and this is to service repairs of heritage assets or to help set up community-led repair cafes or mend workshops. All initiatives in the second criteria must demonstrate climate change tackling credentials and have an onus on supporting rural communities. Grants between 20k and 50k will be available, but match funding will not be required for this, but there must be some demonstrable plan for long-term maintenance of whatever the money is eventually spent on. I'm confident in the criteria that we have set will find favour and will be a success, bearing in mind previous criteria set by the authority for other grant schemes in the last 2.5 years. A meeting on the 15th of December for all rural members in the district for further briefing and input will take place. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Are there any comments or questions from anyone? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Yes, and I did read this afternoon, and I think there's some very good things in it. The one thing that I wanted to flag up was in terms of farm diversification. One of the less salubrious aspects has been the development of haulage yards on farms, which can cause significant issues in rural areas with suddenly HGVs appearing down narrow lanes, and the ward I represent has been particularly affected by this. Is that an area which would be involved with this grant funding, or is it more to do with sort of much smaller farm diversification, like farm shops and things like that? Thank you.
It's to stimulate all forms of rural enterprise, and Councillor Abbott's quite right. There are a number of farmers who have diversified in recent years. I can't give him a specific answer on that, but what I will do is I'll make sure his concerns are taken into account when we formulate the scoring criteria of which these applications will be measured against. But he makes a very good point, and I'll make sure that's taken into consideration when we review these applications. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Van Dolkum.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. I was very interested in Scheme 2, the setting up community-led repair cafes or men workshops. It happens that in the village that I represent, Great Yeldham, they are nearly ready to open, however, would like some more equipment, etc. So the first question, just a two-part question. First of all, does something have to be totally new to qualify? And secondly, can it be less than £20,000, which would be quite going some? Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham.
I think Councillor Van Dolkum raised a very good point. I think the idea was to try and stimulate new initiatives in their rural communities. However, applications will be granted on their merits. I would recommend all applications to come forward.
Any other comments or questions at all? No. Are you happy then to accept the two recommendations that are within the report? Agreed? Thank you very much. Takes us on to item 9, operations and commercialisation. Item 9A, award of a tender for the provision of tyres and associated services for the Council's commercial vehicle fleet. Councillor Van Dolkum.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So agenda item 9A, this report is to seek approval for the award of a tender for the provision of tyres and associated services for the Council's commercial fleet of around 80 vehicles. As stated in the report, current expenditure on tyres and services varies between £85,000 and £105,000 per annum. The current agreement was coming to an end this year, and the Council carried out a full procurement exercise for the provision of tyres and the associated services, the result of which the current supplier, DTM Tyre Management Limited, scored highest of the four companies which tendered for the contract. DTM was also cheaper than the only other tenderer which scored highly enough to be considered. For information, DTM is a well-established, large national company specialising in working with fleets and with contracts with a number of other authorities and a proven track record. Following this, as usual, robust evaluation process, there are two options presented. One is that there would be no change with no continuation of a formal contract with DTM. This would cause several serious impediments, referring in particular to our procurement procedure rules, to our continuing to have our requirements met by DTM if we proceeded in this manner. This option is not recommended. The second option is to award the contract to DTM. Specifically, Cabinet is asked to, 1, award the 3-year contract to DTM at a contract value of £271,000 for the period 1st December 2022 until the 30th of November 2025, with a provision for extension for a further 2 years at £90,000 per annum. 2, to include a provision for an additional contract spend of up to £14,400 to provide flexibility for replacement tyres in any 1 year given that the numbers are variable. I move the award of the contract to DTM and ask for Cabinet support in this decision. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dolken. Any comments or questions from anyone? No, I take it then that you are happy to agree Councillor Van Dolken's recommendations? Agreed. Thank you. Move on to item 9B, which is, I get there, the award of contract for the provision of a grave digging service. And again, Councillor Van Dolken.
Thank you. This further report from operations is to seek approval for the award of the contract for the provision of grave digging services for our 4 cemeteries. As mentioned in the report before you, our previously outsourced grave digging service was terminated in April of this year, and a company called A. Wallace was appointed to provide the service as an interim measure, pending the outcome of a full procurement exercise. It's worth mentioning that this work done by A. Wallace for the Council during the past 7 or 8 months has been of high quality, and they've been proved very reliable. Plus, the company has a good reputation throughout Essex. The procurement exercise was commenced in July for a 3-year contract with the option to extend for a further 2 years. 3 bids were received, of which 2 were validated, and with A. Wallace scoring considerably higher than the other validated supplier, despite being slightly more expensive. Excuse me. There are 3 options before you. One is the recommended option to award the contract to A. Wallace to a total contract value of £225,000 for the period January 2023 to December 2026, with the option to extend for a further 2 years for an additional £150,000. So a total of £375,000 in total. The second option is to award the contract to supplier 2. This is not recommended as they did not demonstrate that they could reach our quality requirements. And option 3 is to not award the contract. This likewise is not recommended as we would be unable to meet our statutory obligations as a burial authority. Can I point out as well, and forgive me if you all appreciate this or know this, that we are, of course, talking about a large amount of money over 5 years or over 3 years, but this is covered by the costs which we pass on to the funeral directors normally who organise this. So I hope that's understandable and clear. So I support the recommended option to award the contract to A. Wallace, and I trust that Cabinet will agree.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dolken. Any comments or questions? No? So once again, you're happy to accept the recommendation, Councillor Van Dolken? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. That then takes us on to agenda item 10A, which is the Housing Strategy 2023-2028. And I'll ask Councillor Bowers to introduce the paper. Councillor Bowers.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Tonight, members, I'm here to present the draft version of the Healthy Housing Strategy 2023 to 2028. Firstly, I'd like to put on record my sincere thanks to Carly Jones, the Strategy and Business Support Manager, who has within 3 months turned this healthy housing strategy and the evidence base around, providing an incredible piece of work that helps us drive forward the housing service at BDC. In preparation for this draft strategy, a members' reference group meeting was held and with members across the chamber, and I'd like to thank Councillors David Mann, Jackie Pell, Paul Euston and Iona Parker. Unfortunately, Councillors Bill Rose and Tom Walsh, who were also part of that group, were unable to make this meeting. Following that meeting, the following day a workshop was attended by key personnel from the NHS, other local authorities, internal officers from key departments and representatives from the voluntary sector and housing providers. Views were gathered around the main housing issues across all tenures within the district. The valuable feedback which this workshop provided, or both workshops provided, has influenced and developed the strategy before being submitted for public consultation. Between the members' reference group and the following stakeholder workshop, there were a range of views and, as mentioned in the report, meeting the needs and supporting our communities improving home standards, access to housing and affordability were highlighted as priority areas to focus on. As also referenced in the report before members tonight, a key theme identified was that residents required both immediate short-term supports reflected in the cost of living and the need for creative measures to be implemented to explore long-term sustainable change which will support future living costs and energy efficiency. These themes have been reflected in the draft strategy. The aim of the Healthy Housing Strategy is to promote homes that are energy efficient, sustain health and well-being, meets the needs of the growing population and build resilient communities with employment opportunities. I'm very happy as the Cabinet Member responsible with the draft strategy being presented tonight, along with the evidence base, and would encourage involvement in the consultation as the outcome will be a document to provide clear strategic direction for housing in the district for the coming years. Therefore, I'm happy to move the recommendations as set out on page 57, and they are: Cabinet considers and approves the draft Healthy Housing Strategy 2023 to 2028 for consultation as set out in Appendix A, and Cabinet notes that the draft strategy will be subject to consultation commencing on the 13th of December 2022, and the final strategy will return to Cabinet together with the consultation considerations for approval at its meeting in March 2023. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Open for discussion. Any comments or questions? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, very good. I did read this, and very good to see that the healthy side of it and reference to energy efficiency. As is a big frustration for many of us on Planning Committee, raising standards for housing in terms of insulation and renewable energy, which help keep costs down for people who live in them and keeps them warmer, is a big issue. I've written to the government about this recently, and they've assured me that standards are going to be improving through the building regulations, with a particular benchmark in 2025. However, also as a member of the Essex Climate Change Commission, Essex County Council are aiming, and they say in collaboration with the BCD authorities, to go above and beyond that to enter into the territory of passive house standards. So my question is, does this strategy, or should this strategy, dovetail with that work in terms of seeking to raise standards on new builds? Because that's basically what we're talking about, to a much higher level. And the reason I raise that now, particularly importantly, I've done some research recently. This authority has, in this district, roughly 2,500, I think it is, houses have been built in the last 3 years, and another 2,500 are under construction. That's 5,000 houses which are not being built, most of them, to these higher standards. But as we move forward, and we've got thousands more houses, as Councillor Gabriel Esprona in the local plan, thousands more will be built. So I think it's a real priority in getting those standards as high as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bowles.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank Councillor Abbott for your comments. And obviously, raising housing standards is a key priority of this authority. And as a member of the Planning Committee myself, I obviously see where you're coming from. I think it's fair to say that those comments you've made will be fed into the consultation, but the points you made is also something that we are all keen about, and hopefully through this process you will see that they are being taken on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tattersalley.
Thank you, Chairman. I was appalled at the death of a child due to condensation and mould in a housing association property, and I shall certainly continue to use my experience in enforcing housing conditions to make sure that our housing providers make sure that their properties are fit for habitation.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Bowles?
Just to agree with, thank you for the comment, but I wholeheartedly agree, Councillor Tattersalley.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Schmidt.
Indeed, Councillor Bowles, because of working, probably hasn't seen or been able to read through the paper that has in fact been produced by Environmental Services on this matter. It just came out literally at tea time for us to have a look at, Councillor Bowles and myself, and then once it's agreed will be circulated to all members. And we have told the government that some of their ideas are great, but again, there is a problem that government needs to sort out, but it is something that has been actioned already.
Thank you very much. Good. So we'll know more about that
in the next couple of days.
That's fine. Thank you. Councillor Van Doken.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Bowers. I was struck by the projections for population growth over the next few decades, in particular of the older generation, and I do feel that this needs to be looked at at the same time as where we actually put our housing. So densification, I believe, is important, as is the, whatever we want to call it, the new or the garden community, one with facilities and transport. That's all.
Yes, no, thank you, Councillor Van Dalken, and I think that's the purpose of obviously having a housing strategy to meet those sort of needs going forward. I think some of the figures that are really good that were that's part of the evidence base for this strategy, but they are quite thought-provoking in some of those numbers, and especially the elderly population that we're going to see. But the idea, obviously, of having a relevant housing strategy will hopefully address those needs going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions from anyone? No? In which case there are the two recommendations that we approve this draft housing strategy, and we note that it will go out to consultation, and following consultation will return to us at Cabinet for our meeting on in March 2023. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. I think that brings us then to the end of the agenda for this evening, and I thank you all for your attendance, and I'll declare the meeting closed at 8:27. Thank you very much indeed.